Hello, and welcome to Columbia Access Television Studio A on Stevens campus. My name is Jennifer Erickson. I'm the executive director here at CAT, and I'm honored to present one in a series we call these CAT Chats. And we've had some amazing people on these chats over the past year. This is our second annual collaboration with the Third Goal International Film Festival, which takes place tomorrow, which is Saturday, February 2nd, starting at 1 p.m. At the Mizzou Student Center. And we're starting this off with a guest that we have in town with the festival. And we're going to have the opportunity to chat with Alrick Brown today. Mike will say a little bit more about Alrick's filmography and history. But these are meant to be kind of an informal discussion and really to discuss the journey of an artist. I think what we've talked about with other CAT Chats is that it's rare for a filmmaker, I mean, it happens certainly, but to go to film school, know exactly what he or she wants to do, and then make films. And again, that does happen, but a lot of people get into filmmaking from various different paths. So we're here to talk with Alrick today about his particular path, and Mike Burden of the Returned Peace Corps Volunteers will be leading this journey. But we also have an audience, and I'll have the microphone, so it's meant to be informal. We can all ask questions and that type of thing. A couple thanks. These CAT Chats are made possible through the Missouri Arts Council, which is a state agency. And then there are other sponsors that we might want to mention,
Sure.
Mike, if you don't mind. But
absolutely.
Great. I think that I'm done with my speech, so take it away.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would like to first up front thank all of our sponsors, including Columbia Access Television, for helping us to make this happen and to bring Alrick to town. The Missouri Arts Council, of course, Westminster College, where we visited today and had a great chat, KBIA, KOPN, and the following University of Missouri partners: the Chancellor's Diversity Initiative, Master of Public Health Program, the Graduate School, and the Black Studies Program, the Career Center, and the Black History Month Committee. So thanks so much for making this possible and allowing us to put on this festival that's tomorrow. We'll have, in addition to Alrick's feature film, Rwanda, we'll also have 4 documentary films, and we hope that we see you there. So without further ado, let me introduce you to this man on my right here. His collective works have screened in over 65 festivals worldwide, earning numerous awards and honors. Among them is HBO Life Through Your Lens Emerging Filmmaker Award for the critically acclaimed documentary Death of Two Sons, which he produced. In 2004, he was one of 4 NYU students featured in the FIC documentary series Film School, produced by Academy Award nominee Nanette Bernstein. His first feature, Rwanda, made its world premiere as recipient of the prestigious World Cinema Audience Award at the 2011 Sundance Film Festival. Since then, Rwanda has screened internationally in over 20 festivals, adding more than half dozen honors to the writer-director's credits. In November 2011, Rwanda was released in the United States theaters through the independent film collaborative African American Film Festival Releasing Movement. Alrick began his career as an educator, but found his true calling after visiting the slave castle of Elmina in Ghana during a 2-year tour with the Peace Corps in Côte d'Ivoire, or the Ivory Coast. The interactions with the people of his village and his overall experiences in West Africa informed his creative expression, an expression first fostered by his birth in Kingston, Jamaica, and migration to and upbringing in Plainfield, New Jersey. Since then, Alrick's work has been described as cinematic archaeology because of his vision to unearth stories that otherwise would not be told. His commitment to revealing the heart of and world around a story is what draws audiences, peers, and clients to his work. Other projects in play from Brown include directing the feature Somebody to Love, which was accepted into Tribeca All Access 2011. He's also co-writing and producing Treble, an IFP 2011 Emerging Narrative honoree. Beyond film, he recently made his small screen debut directing an episode of ABC's Final Witness, and that series will air in July 2012. A fluent French speaker, Alrick graduated from Rutgers with a BA in English and a Master's of Education, where he taught undergraduate course on African American image and cinema. He received his MFA from NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, where he later taught various courses to both undergraduate and graduate film students. Recognized as one of Filmmaker magazine's 25 New Faces to Watch and an emerging filmmaker by Vanity Fair, Alrick Brown is an award-winning writer, director, and producer, and a fantastic speaker, as I can attest to after today. And I'm very pleased to introduce you to Alrick Brown.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. He didn't write that. My people wrote that for him to make me sound better. So, you know, kind of, she feels like cheating now.
Yeah.
But it's all actually true. It's actually, believe it or not. So I guess maybe we want to show them the reel.
Yeah, let's take a look at the reel. Let's get some context.
Get a sense of the history of the work. Jimmy, you want to throw that reel up so people can see some of the work I've done over the years?
Once I directed, I realized, you know, it's overwhelming responsibility of it. So you learn to respect it because they got quite a job. And when they do it well, it's magic.
Stop it! Leave them alone! This court, Moser. Leave them alone! They're killing children! Our job. They're raping women!
Men with vengeance in their hearts need guidance, not encouragement.
Are you crazy? You see what's going on out there?
Please don't. Don't use what's going on out there as an excuse. You weren't thinking about politics when you're sleeping with someone else.
Aren't I nicer than a mirror?
Shut your mouth.
Who do you think you're talking to? Don't think just because you're a man, you just talk to me. Stella! Joe! You're not alone.
Please tell me what I don't get! Call your mother.
I heard
was
what
calling
you
your
said.
girlfriends and get your hand on.
Get your f***ing hands up!
Angelito.
¿Qué?
Angelito Cordona.
¿Me conoces?
Wow. So there are many ways, to tell a story. what led you to decide that it was through the camera?
Filmmaking, for obvious reasons, is one of the most powerful mediums on this planet, you know, and I was actually a substitute teacher for a while in my neighborhood after finishing my first master's degree and before going into the Peace Corps in West Africa. I was working in a middle school for an extended subbing period, and I was the black teacher when they didn't get a black male teacher often. They were really excited, and it was mostly black and Latino students, and I thought I was doing this great work working with these kids. And they would go home on Friday and come back on Monday reciting a song or a scene from a movie that they just saw. And it was like everything that I was doing in the classroom was kind of erased by mass media in like 1 or 2 viewings, or with the inundation that they get from the mass media. And I knew that I had to have a bigger classroom. And I knew that I wanted to have control over the medium that was controlling how they behaved and how they were in my class. When I went into the Peace Corps, I was in Ivory Coast in West Africa, and one of the only vacations that I took was to Ghana. And while I was in Ghana, I went and I visited the slave castles. And I don't know if you know much about the slave castles, but it was where African slaves were housed before they were shipped to the Americas. And it was a very traumatic experience, because in this room, this very small room, you know, the walls are darkened by blood and feces 450 years later. And I walked out of the room, and I was actually on my way from Elmina up to a village, because one of my Peace Corps buddies had told me there was a village up the road, and I put my backpack on, and I was walking along the beach and contemplating what I had just experienced at the castle. And after about an hour or two of walking, I started to get scared. Like, nobody's been around for an hour, and what if I started thinking about mortality? What if I died, like right here, right now? Who would find me? And I actually had a tape recorder with me that I was recording my journey on, and I remember walking maybe an hour, even more, and I sat down on a rock, and I started talking into this tape recorder, and I was like leaving a message to my mother, and Ma, I love you, and you know, if anyone finds this, and you know, but I also started thinking about my life and everything that I had done up until that moment, and I asked myself a very simple question. If I died doing something, what would I be happy doing? And if I was in the process of doing something and I lost my life while I was doing it, it was just like, and I'd be okay with that. And I added up my experiences, my journeys, my education, and film was the answer. And I had, you know, I guess thinking about those students and thinking about the medium and being a lover of film, but it wasn't, I never touched a camera. I took one film class at Rutgers undergrad. It was a summer class. It was called Hitchcock and Orson Welles. And it inadvertently became the foundation of my filmmaking without even realizing it. But I was fascinated by their styles and by Hitchcock's style. But when I said film on that beach, everything made sense. I kept walking, and just like it is in Africa, I see like an old lady like a half hour later. I think I was going through like the most treacherous walk of my life, and this old lady walks by with wood on her head, and she's like, village is right up there. So I keep walking, I get to the village, and by the time I get back to Ivory Coast, I applied to film school, and from Africa, and NYU was one of the schools I applied to. To my surprise, the application actually came to my village, and I applied, and you know, I got in. And which is, those of you who don't know, NYU is one of the top film schools in the world, and it's very expensive. And you know, that year, close to 1,000 people applied, and they only take 36. So the chances of getting in that program were crazy. And I got in, because, you know, what is a kid with no film background, with my upbringing, how do I get into a film program with some of the elite filmmakers in the world? And it was my writing. And I believe to a certain extent, the voice that I was coming with from Africa, from growing up in Jamaica, but you know, that's what a filmmaker does. They just, anyone can learn a camera or editing, or but it's how you see the world and that little twisted perspective that you put on the world that informs your work. And that's what a film school is looking for. They're looking for what voice you come with.
Absolutely. So you got to film school and, you know, no formal training, you know, in terms of the technique, but you had ideas, you had perspective. You know, how did you direct that? You know, where'd you start channeling that energy? Did you have concepts when you were sitting on that rock? Did you have a story that you wanted to tell then?
Yeah, you know, I've had since I started watching films, I had concepts. I would see a movie when I was a kid, and I'd be like, if they just did this or they just did that. But you know, there's political things burning inside of me, messages and things that I wanted to say to the world. And one of my mentors is Melvin Van Peebles, who did Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. But he said this to me once, and I'll never forget it. He said, if film ceased to be relevant today, he would find another medium. Because film is only my medium. It's not the thing. For me, it's storytelling. Like, I use film as the medium in which to tell my stories. If film ceased to exist tomorrow, I would sing it, I would write it, I would do it in a poem, I would do theater, because I still want to reach people. And so when I got to NYU, I got there with all these things that I wanted to say to the world. And some of them were really intense, some of them were really funny. And film school is like this great place where I can make the mistakes and challenge myself and try things without somebody in a studio or a producer telling me you can do this. You know, it's the money that I raised, and why you have to raise your own money, so I can tell whatever story I want to. So I challenge myself to tell some of those. But yeah, I came there with burning to get certain things out of my system.
So for those aspiring filmmakers out there who are thinking, you know, should I go to film school? You know, should I try and make it on my own? You know, what advice do you have?
So film school was my road, and it was a good road for me because film school provides you with that space where you can fail. And that's the most important thing. In film school, you can try and you can fail. Because when you're doing it outside of film school, now you're an independent person. Let's say you're here in Columbia, Missouri. You get your friends on the weekend, and you try every weekend, and you mess up. You feel like you've wasted people's time, and you screwed up, and you don't have the time or the privilege or the money to keep trying. So there are definitely benefits to film school. The fact that you get to work with people, and the most important thing about film school for me is I got to watch other people fail. So we're working in teams of 6 or 7 people, and you know, we're all making movies, and I see that, oh, he made like those mistakes, and so now when I make my movie, I don't have to make that mistake. The learning curve is just oftentimes longer when you're doing it on your own and out in the world. But if you want to tell your story, if you really want to tell your story, you know, telling the story is number one. It's not about film school or not film school. Film school was a means to an end. There are a lot of people who go to film school and they probably shouldn't be there, and people who are making films outside of film school and probably should be there. I think the key factor is that desire to tell a story has to be there. Far too many people want to be filmmakers or directors because they want to be famous, or they want the glamour, or they want some people. That's the first question I ask someone, especially actors. They'll tell me like, oh yeah, I want to be in your field. And I was like, how do I become an actor? I was like, do you want to be an actor or do you want to be famous? And they have to think about that. Because people actually want to be famous. People want to be directors because they want the power, the glamour. or the glamour, they think that it's there. They don't actually want the work of being a director. And so, but people who really want to tell stories, they will tell a story with or without film school, because that story has to exist.
Absolutely. You shared a story that you worked on in film school earlier today, and just really conveyed to me how compelling of a story you can tell, and you were restricted in the assignment, you know, in a short amount of time, and I would like to, if we could, you know, share that with the audience now.
Yeah, so just really quickly, when you first get to NYU, Jimmy, we're gonna actually run a Familiar Fruit, but when you first get to NYU, your first assignment is a 4-minute short film. It's black and white, and you're shooting on film. It has to be all done outside because you're using natural light, no dialogue, no sound except diegetic. That means it's coming from the environment, and no music. And you have to tell a story with these limitations, and we'll talk about limitations. But and so this was my first film, first time ever making a movie, and Familiar Fruit was the product. So let's take a look at it.
All right. Thanks, Jimmy. If you could, since we didn't see that first part, if you could kind of set up the person that was looking in the window there.
Yeah, so the film opens up with the delivery guy walking down the street. It's actually in Harlem, and he passes a museum. Very comfortable, hanging out. It's a route that he's done many times. And he walks past this museum display, and he looks inside the display. And as he looks in the display, he sees this lynching photograph, and he keys in on the young boy in the image and the man in the image. I don't know if you guys get that, but it's actually he's looking at himself when he was a kid, having experienced that incident. Yeah, and that was my first one, and kind of laid the foundation. I don't know, you have a specific question about it?
Yeah,
I don't know
well, you know, I made. I'll let one of the audience members, since she's got her hand up, but I'll hold off on my question for a second.
Okay, no problem.
I just really want to know, was that inspired by Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit?
It's a very good question. The title, yes, was inspired by Billie Holiday's song. So, 1890 to 1950 was the height of lynching in America. And at that time, countless numbers of African Americans and some others were actually lynched. That means no trial, no jury. You just got hung in the tree because you were accused of breaking some law. And these things were so common that, the lynchings were just a part of it. They would take body parts, fingers as souvenirs, genitals as souvenirs, ears. People started taking photographs, they had picnics, and the U.S. Postal Service actually had postcards. And when I was in college, I came across this display, and I saw the display. And as a director, this was what I was talking about, that slanted look at things. As a director, this is before I became a director, actually. I saw this exhibit, and I wanted to say something about that exhibit. But I looked at the bodies hanging in the tree, and it was painful to look at the bodies. I started focusing on the audience, the people who stood around and watched this stuff, and then the faces of the children who were brought there by their parents to experience. And I started thinking about them. So as a director, for me, it's not pointing finger or blame. It's like finding the humanity that connects us. And I'm like, where is that kid now? What is he doing? And so I wanted to tell this story about where that kid was now. And when I got to NYU, I found a vehicle, and it was through filmmaking. But during that time period, it was actually a Jewish guy. The Maripol family. I can't remember. They were related to the Rosenbergs, actually, who were killed. He wrote the song "Strange Fruit" in protest of what was happening during that time period, and Billie Holiday actually popularized it by singing it. So it's a very connected story, and then I titled it "Familiar Fruit" to bring us back to that memory. And if you guys don't know, the song is strange fruit hanging from southern trees, blood on the roots, blood at the leaves, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. So yeah.
Good question. Okay, so like I said, I just really found it compelling, and I'm interested in how you move through from that, short storytelling process to take the leap into creating feature-length films, and was that a difficult decision, or you knew you always wanted to go that route, and what were some of the, the challenges that you had in making that transition?
Right. Well, short filmmaking is such a great tool to figure out how to tell a story from beginning to end in a very short amount of time. I can't remember the writer who said this, but he says, "I don't have the time to write you a short story, so I'll write you a long one. I'll write you a short letter, so I'll write you a long one." Because people can be very wordy and can put a lot of things, but it's very difficult to be concise, to be poetic. It's very difficult to to respect limitations. That's why the Shakespearean sonnet form is so beautiful to me. You have 10 syllables, you have 14 lines, you have 10 syllables per line. You got the couplet at the end, and you got to get your art in there and respect those limitations. Well, I made that short, and I made several more because that was the NYU curriculum. So I got this practice. And filmmakers, what a short film allows you to do is to have multiple beginnings and ends. You start a thing and finish it. Start a thing, finish it. Start a thing, finish it. Anyone who's really successful at their work, they have experience in starting and completing. They're not just starting and having things live forever without completing it. Just like cleaning a room, starting it and finish it. Seriously, like those simple tasks that, you know, my mother was a housekeeper and was a maid, and like, you know, just understanding that you can see the accomplishment that day. We shot Familiar Fruit in 2 days for $200, $300. You know, and I could see the result of my labor, having those starts and finishes. But what is a movie? What is a feature-length movie? It's a series of scenes that are shorts, that should be shorts. You know, when you're writing a good scene, who the character is at the end of the scene shouldn't be who they were at the beginning, or the tension or the feeling should be somehow different. If I love you at the start of this scene, I better love you more when the scene is over, or less.
Okay.
Or we have, you know, or otherwise, why have the scene? Why does it need to exist if nothing has changed between us? Really? You slept with my girlfriend?
I'm sorry.
Now we have a movie. You know, it's like, bam. So, yeah, so, particularly with Rwanda, what was great about that process, I don't know, jump ahead, but
it's okay.
When I got to Rwanda, I didn't know, I mean, I had to, you know, well, I'll tell you how I got into that film, but I had to write the script a very short amount of time. And I could not write a feature-length film in the time that they gave me. And so I wrote several shorts and intertwined them, because I used the very limitations that we were given and used the stories that Rwandans were sharing with me, and that's how the structure of that film came about. So the film has kind of a Pulp Fiction, Traffic type of storyline where all the stories kind of weave together, and so you can see different perspectives. But that was my way of using the limitation of not having the time and using shorts to connect everything.
Yeah, turn a challenge into sort of an advantage to guide you.
Absolutely.
If you could tell us, you know, how you came to those stories. You know, like tell us what happened. How'd you get there?
Okay, so I did 2 years in the Peace Corps. I left the Peace Corps, went to NYU Film School. One of my buddies, Joshua Rod, Josh, if you're out in the world, hey, he went to Rwanda to do work with Tulane University. He and his wife were living and working there. And he got into a cab, and the cab driver was playing Bruce Springsteen, and they hit it off.
Sure.
This cab driver's name was Ishmael Ntiabose. Ishmael is a genocide survivor, a Muslim engineering college student who was driving cabs part-time to make money, and an aspiring filmmaker. So he and Josh started talking, and Josh said, "Oh, I have a friend in the U.S. who's a director," and they became friends, and Ishmael started emailing me, asking me questions about filmmaking. And he was working on, he was crewing on films that were going through Rwanda, but crewing assistant to an assistant. He never got a chance to actually do the hands-on stuff. And in 2009, he called me and said, "Alrick, Josh and I have this grant from the European Commission to do a movie." And I'm like, "About what? The genocide?" And I'm like, "Well, that's kind of been done." And he said, "Well, we want to do a story about how, when the genocide started, the Mufti of Rwanda, who's the head religious leader, he issued a fatwa to Muslims forbidding them from participating in the genocide, which made mosques the safest places in the country." So it was a story that I didn't know and I hadn't heard, and I found that rather offensive that this huge international thing had happened in '94, and I don't even know this huge component to it. So I said, "Yeah, Ishmael, I'll come to Rwanda and I'll help you." And I went to Rwanda as a consultant, and I read the script that he had, and it was a 40-page script or something like that. And those of you who don't know, 1 page in proper format equals a minute. So 40 minutes, if you have a script that's 40 minutes, it's too long to be a short film, and it's too short to be a feature film. It's kind of in limbo, and you're probably, look, if you're rich and you can just make a movie that's 40 minutes, cool, and you have all the resources, and you're making it for fun. I don't have time to make movies for fun, and it's too much of a privilege, you know? I told him, you got to make it shorter or longer, and he wanted to make a feature, and he only had $250,000 for the production budget. Also, there were explosions and helicopters and tanks and missiles and lots of bodies, and it was about the priest and the imam working together to save lives, but he had a voiceover, himself giving the voiceover of the entire story. And you know, I love Ishmael to death. Ishmael, if you're listening to this, I love you, man. But it was bad, you know, on various levels. And not just bad, no, not bad. It could have been better, but it would have been almost impossible to tell that story with the budget.
Sure.
And have it resonate. But when I got to Rwanda, in this country where so many people were affected, you know, 1 million people were killed in a country of 10 million, everyone had a story. Mm-hmm. What I started to realize was Rwanda was this tapestry, like a country woven of stories. And every time I met someone, they would tell me another story. And as they told me these stories, that's a movie.
Yeah.
That's a movie. These personal little stories, not about the genocide per se, but life while the genocide was going on. Because even in the midst of the most horrific things in our lives, mm-hmm. you lose a family member, you lose a friend, you're going through a divorce. Sure. You still got to take out the garbage.
Yeah.
You still got to go to the store and buy groceries. You might go to a funeral of a relative, but the girl you love might be standing across the way, and you might still be in love with her or fall in love with her. So in the film, I tried to focus on the life, the love, the humanity, and the hope during this time, and which is in every tragedy, actually. Not to romanticize it, but while you're living it, that's almost the only way you can sustain and live through it, to know that there's a connect. You and I are friends. Our friendship might just get us through this horror. And I focused on those relationships, which also, for me as a storyteller, and I'll talk about this more during the screening, mm-hmm. you can come in and you can see the bodies in other films and the statistics and the numbers and the blood. That might serve to desensitize you, but making you a person, making you cute or sexy, or make people like angry at you.
Sure.
Now you're human.
Yeah.
And it's much more difficult to lynch. It's much more difficult to pull a trigger. It's much more difficult to swing a machete when you know my name is Alrick or your name is Mike or so the purpose of my film was to humanize people.
And much more difficult to look the other way.
Absolutely, and let it happen.
Yeah. So, you know, your perspective was that, you know, these are untold stories, you know, and so I guess probably shortly after arriving, you realized you were going to be more than a consultant.
You know, it's not like I wanted to do that, but I realized it's like sometimes you're called to do a certain thing, and I didn't want him to fail. It was too important of a story to tell. One of the things that a lot of beginning filmmakers, the mistakes that they make, they think because their story is important, that it's good. They think that because I'm making a movie about cancer or my grandmother dying of cancer, that it's a good story. Or because I'm making a movie about this issue, black filmmakers go through this all the time, making a movie about race, and because we need the black power. If you don't, you have more of a responsibility to make sure that the quality of it mm-hmm. is to a point where the audience is going to go on that journey with you. Not because of the politics or the stance, but because your craft is there and is evident and is hopefully seamless. And so my role was more of a teacher with Ishmael. Like I sat down with him and said, this is why people won't listen. You have to get them to listen and see this differently. You have to get them to see Rwanda. That's the responsibility. And he understood that immediately. And that's why he let me work through some of these things.
Right on. So tell us a little bit about the filmmaking in Rwanda. You know, like I know you shot it pretty quickly. So like, how were you able to tell such compelling stories, you know, working in a country that you weren't that familiar with, you know, with a limited budget? Like, what are some of the ways your team and the people you worked with there overcame those challenges? And
Well, that's a good question, because filmmaking is difficult. So just, you know, I don't, somebody's having an easy time making a movie, you're not challenging yourself in some way, shape, or form. Filmmaking is tough. Making Familiar Fruit was a strenuous process, even in that limited amount of time. Going to Rwanda, it had its own challenges. Fortunately, I knew some of Africa by living, so there's some cultural things that I could get through. I speak French. There's another cultural thing. In Rwanda, they speak French, Swahili, Kinyarwanda, and English. And so at any given time, I wouldn't know what to speak, but having two of those really helped the process. I met an amazing casting director. His name's Simon. Simon was the assistant to one of the top casting directors in East Africa. And he found most of my crew, most of my cast. The lead actress in the film, you guys get to see it, she was walking by the production office. He asked her to come inside, talk to her. I met her. I asked if she would cut her hair. I was like, you know, you got the part. She said yes. I was like, you got the part. We made the film in 16 days. And we had about 2 weeks to prep. So there was no time for anybody who was like wishy-washy or maybe or no. You're in or you're out. I'll just find somebody else. That's the kind of storytelling. But it wasn't flippant. It was like I had to look in that person's eyes. And it's, you know, culturally it's a tough thing, you know. It was like, do you trust me with your life, with your, how I'm gonna present you? And that's all I needed to see, if they would trust me and listen to me. And it's like, from that moment, we can work together. Most of the people in the film are non-professional actors. But if I knew if they trusted me, that we'd be okay. The one thing, the insurance that I put in place though, was I made sure that camera and sound were people who I was bringing in from the States. Because I didn't know who to trust on camera and sound, because those are technical things that you know, you're in this foreign place, you have no idea what's going to happen. And so I brought Danny Vecchione, Italian-American filmmaker who I've worked with many times, and Allison Jackson, black female sound recordist. I just know these people are top-notch. So I made sure money was put in place, that they could fly out there. We had the cameras, and that we could make this thing happen. And so that was my security. Everything else was kind of up in the air. But it was one of the most difficult shoots that one could ever imagine. And we got through it not because, well, first off, there were miracles every day looking down on us somehow that helped us get through it. At a certain point when I was writing the script, I called someone in the States. I had lost hope. Like after the first week, I was just like, not even first week, man, I think I wrote the first sentence. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And a friend of mine in Brooklyn said, think about all those souls, all those bodies, all those people who died. They have your back, man. That's what she said to me. She's like, they have your back. The ancestors have your back on this one. And I started writing. But every day something happened on set where someone did something to save the entire movie. And it was just magical like that. Like, it was like, if this one thing doesn't happen, this movie has to stop. We shot it in 16 days during rainy season, during grasshopper mating season, meaning grasshoppers would come out and they were attracted to the lights. And so you imagine trying to shoot a film where grasshoppers are I mean, I'm not talking about 3. I'm talking about thousands. I'm talking about infestation, like birds or I'm serious, like a horror movie infestation. And we made it. I mean, so grasshoppers, what we did was we put decoy lights down the street, let the grasshoppers go there to give us time to shoot, and they would fly back and forth. I mean,
those are things you don't account for.
Yeah, I mean, you can account for that. You know, we also didn't have equipment, so we shot. We didn't have dollies. So everything was handheld. The batteries that we had shipped from the United States never made it to the embassy. So the entire shoot, there was a car, one of those car-sized batteries attached to the camera that one Rwandan, his job was to carry that around for the entire shoot behind the camera. I mean, that's how, the first few days we made our map boxes, the front of these things that, there's like a hood for the camera, they cover the front of the camera. We made them out of bamboo and straw. I mean, I'm not kidding. There was that type of, but I had a crew, the Rwandans and the Americans, and one guy came from France that were so amazing. They were so MacGyver. So people who know for the 80s, they were so MacGyver. They could rig and fix. It was amazing, and they made it possible. But you know why? Because they believed in me. They believed in the story. They believed what we were doing was worth doing. And so they gave so much. I did reach out to some other people before I got this crew. Mm-hmm. And anyone who showed any hesitation, anyone who was thinking in the same US mentality, so what's my per diem? Look, you got it. This one is like, if we eat, we're gonna be happy,
Yeah.
This one, I want you to know if your heart is there first before your paycheck. And that's what happened. People's hearts came before their paychecks, and we made it through together.
That's amazing. And the result is incredible. And if we could, Jimmy, do you have the trailer for that available? And I can't see the folks in the crowd as well, so if you have a question, speak up.
A funny thing about genocide is you never know who's knocking. The Rwandan genocide lasted 3 months, about 100 days, from April 3rd to July 4th, 1994.
How long do you think we can last?
Maybe a few more days.
It was long enough for the seasons to change. Long enough for some to become heroes.
We are not here for vengeance, we are here for justice.
And others villains. Long enough for some to question their faith. Please stay with me.
Are you crazy? You see what's going on out there?
You weren't thinking about politics when you were sleeping with someone else.
Forgiveness is not the suppression of anger. Forgiveness is asking for a miracle. The ability to see through someone's mistakes to the truth that lies within all of our hearts. You have a baby on the way. Why are you taking point?
I want my son to have the opportunities that you and I did not have. Who has more to fight for?
About 100 days. It was long enough for us to share our stories.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left, and I would love to talk a little bit more about that process, but I want to also make sure people get to address their questions and talk a little bit about how you've moved forward, too, from making a film like Kinyarwanda, amazing film. Like, what's the business like of a filmmaker, like choosing projects and wanting to tell your story, but also wanting to eat?
Right. Well, one of the things filmmakers have to keep in mind, this is a business. It is show business. Don't forget about the business part of that. And for me personally, I asked myself a simple question. Philip Seymour Hoffman gave a speech a couple years ago. I'll never forget it. He says, when you start to make a project, ask yourself a question: does this project need to exist? Does it need to exist now? And that's what I ask myself before I endeavor to make any film. Does it need to exist? Then I have that personal question I ask myself: if I died making this film, would I be happy? And so those are always a part of the questions that are going through my head as I sit down to engage, or someone asks me to be a part of any project. But aside from that, then I still have to eat, and so not everything is going to be the life or death, or put all that love and passion into it. Well, that's actually a lie. What I've found is that I try to find something to love about anything that I do, even if it is to pay the bills. But one of the things filmmakers have to keep in mind is that when you're making a film independently, a lot of us are only focused on craft, and working and learning our craft, our piece of the puzzle. If you are a filmmaker or a producer or a writer, you have to be thinking about the business side. When you're producing your film, you have to be thinking about what festivals, who your audience is, how are you going to promote your audience, promote to your audience, how are you going to build an audience if one doesn't exist. If 50% of the job is making a film, the other 50% of the work is getting it seen. And one of the things that's happening today is a lot of people are going by old models of filmmaking, the process. Somebody made a film back in the day, someone saw it, they got a lot of money, and it's over, No. It's hard to get a film made, it's hard to make a film, and the truth is you have to fight to get it seen. One of the reasons we did well at Sundance is, I didn't take for granted what we had up on the screen. I told my team, imagine we had the worst movie in the world. How do we promote it at Sundance? So one of my business partner, Deatra Harris, she made phone calls to local churches and groups and said, come to our screening. This film might be interesting to you and your group. We hung up posters, we hung up flyers, we created our Facebook page, Twitter. We were constantly communicating and walking up and down the street with T-shirts that said love, forgiveness, and hope, and and as we walked up and down the street, everybody was like, oh, that's that movie. So by the time I arrived in Park City, Utah for Sundance, people were like, oh, you're the Sundance, you're the Rwanda people. Yeah. Because we had already created a name for ourselves before we arrived there. That's a part of your job. And if you're arrogant or naive enough to think that it's not, you're doing yourself a disservice. Filmmaking is not supposed to be artistic masturbation. It is not about me showing you how smart I am, how clever I am. Your work, you're making a film so an audience can interact and engage with it. It is for people. If you are privileged enough to make films just for fun, and you're wealthy enough and you can put them on your shelf or give them to your family, that is wonderful. I commend you. But in general, you're talking about thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars and people's time, people's talent, and that is a service, and it should be respected and treated as such.
If you could, tell us just a little bit about first screenings in Rwanda and your interaction with how the film was seen by Rwandans.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, this is one story of different perspectives that we didn't try to villainize, but we tried to humanize. And we showed it in Rwanda, the Rwandan Film Festival, Hillywood, and we actually won their best film competition, which for us, that was like our Academy Award. Just to have Rwandans who approved and who were proud of it because they saw themselves on the screen and they saw this positive message. But I think Rwandans more saw the fact that this film was about unity and bringing people together, and the forgiveness that the country is trying to employ in its future. I know there are people out there who are still angry, who are not going to let go of the anger that they have because of what happened. But in general, our we've been very proud. I made this film for Rwandans, actually. It just so happened, for and with Rwandans. It just so happens that other audiences have appreciated it as well.
Great. What are some of the stories you're working on, projects you're working on right now that you're excited about that we can look for in the coming months or years?
No, I mean, I'm always writing. Right now I'm working on an adaptation of a novel by J.M. Benjamin. He's an author in my town, former drug dealer, criminal, who became an author, and I'm adapting one of his books called My Man's in Them. It's a very interesting venture for me because I'm going back home to my neighborhood, and I'm working with this guy because I respect and love the fact that he changed his life by becoming an author, and I want the kids in our community to see us working together, making this film for them. And because filmmakers, I tell this to every filmmaker, process over product. You could die doing this, you can lose your life at any time. Make sure that you're, not only that you're making films that you care about, that you love, but that the process, that you're involving people, making sure they're learning, making sure that people are growing, making sure that the process of making the film is also something that is nurturing and beneficial. That way you can't lose. So that's one of the things I employ into my journey.
Oh, I think that's a wonderful approach. It's almost like built right into the filmmaking is community development, community outreach, engagement. It's something that as a non-filmmaker, I don't know much about the process. So hearing that it's great to know that type of filmmaking approach is out there, and we thank you for doing it, and looking forward to that and other upcoming projects as well. I understand there might be a martial arts film
actually,
as well.
Yeah, I am working with a gentleman in Connecticut who's a martial artist he's 74 years old, and he wanted to tell his story, so it's a Korean cast, and but he's been training white kids his entire life pretty much in the suburbs, and so we're making a movie about him pretty soon. I'm really excited about that. For me, any film that challenges me in the type of storytelling and the type of action and the type of structure is going to take me to the next level in my craft. So martial arts, drug dealer, Kenya, Rwanda, I'm going to do a romantic comedy eventually, and cartoon somewhere.
All opportunities to grow.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well,
Mike, you did such a great job at leading this discussion, so thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for being my guest.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Cat Studios.
Come out tomorrow, guys. See the full film. Enjoy some great food, great camaraderie. Interact with people from around the world. We got a wonderful lineup. It starts at 1 with Kenya, Rwanda. Alrick will be there, of course, and give you a little introduction, and then, of course, be there after the film to answer your questions. And we'll have a panel after every film. So hard-hitting, thought-provoking, and also entertaining films. And we really appreciate you coming out, and hope to see you again tomorrow.
Free food.
Yeah.
Just key in on that part. Free food.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Free food.
Free food.
Free film.
If you get there first, it's more free food. Thank you.